Hello once again. Good morning. I think we can start a bit early. Good morning to everyone. Thank you all for joining in person here in Sharm el Sheikh, and also to our online participants who are watching in the IIPFC CC live streaming link, or the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change Pavilion. It's also live streamed in their Facebook page and in their website. Good morning, I'm Dazzle Labapis. I'm the Program Officer for the Non-Timber Forest Products Exchange Program Asia. And we are organizing this side event entitled Amplifying Indigenous People and Local Communities' Voices and the Security of Territories of Life and Customary Tenure Towards Meaningful Climate Action. So we are a group of different civil society organizations and indigenous people's organization networks from the ICCA Southeast Asia Consortium and the Civil Society Organization on Social Forestry in ASEAN. So this morning we will have a discussion about what are ICCAs and what are indigenous people's territories of life, and what are our organization members doing to amplify the IPLC voices towards climate action. So we can start. I'll start with introducing our speakers in front of you. So we have Celine Lim on your on my far right. Celine is a Kayan from Long Pila, Baram, Malaysia. Celine is the managing director of Save Rivers. It's a mini-based CSO that advocates for indigenous people's rights and environmental issues. Their work scope covers the capacity building, networking, research, education, and advocacy as they support and empower rural communities to protect their land, rivers, and watersheds. Indigenous people and environmental rights are important to Celine, as she has experienced firsthand how indigenous communities are affected by the forced drastic changes in their environment and livelihood through systemic changes. With her is Maina Pumarin of NTFP-EP Asia. She is our program officer focusing on women and gender and facilitating small grants for women and indigenous people and local communities. She has worked for around 20 years with indigenous communities in the Philippines and Asia on indigenous people's rights, tenure, and health. Our lone gentleman here is Ladoy from Point, Myanmar. Ladoy is a Kachin indigenous people and graduated from the University of Forestry and Environmental Science, Yezin. He is currently working as program coordinator for promotion of indigenous and nature together, Point, conducting research and advocacy work related to environment, climate change, and indigenous peoples issues. And finally, we have Nguyen Hai Van, or Van for short. Nguyen Hai Van has over 10 years of experience in conservation and development as hybrid practitioner and researcher. She is the deputy director of Vietnam-based nonprofit organization Pan Nature and a researcher at WIS Academy for Nature, or the Institute of Geography and Sustainability, Switzerland. Van researches are more focused on the field of political ecology, social forestry, and social justices for IPLCs, traditional knowledge and rights. So maybe we can start the discussion. I will pass now the floor to our colleague here, Celine. Celine, maybe you can share us more about ICCAs and what is ICCA, what is the meaning of ICCA, how is it relevant to climate action, and what are your key recommendations and challenges and opportunities that you see as an alliance of IPLCs and civil society organizations in Southeast Asia? Celine, you have 5 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Dazzle. Good morning, everybody. My name is Celine. I'm from East Malaysia. I'm indigenous, also from East Malaysia, and it's really an honor to be here with all our brothers and sisters from everywhere this morning. It has been great just seeing and listening to many of what you are living through even in your reality today. So I share that same sentiment. But in the meantime, before we start, I also would like to recognize a declaration even this morning. I want to acknowledge our ancestors who have walked before us, and we hold our responsibility to those who will follow us as sacred, and we recognize and thank also the indigenous and local people on whose land we meet today. So I thought it would be appropriate to start that even as we meet together today as an international team. So yes, just as what my colleague and counterpart Dazzle have asked, who and what is ICCA? So the ICCA Consortium Southeast Asia, on which we are representing, we are an international membership organization dedicated to promoting the appropriate recognition and support of indigenous peoples and community conserved areas and territories. So I'm here today with also my core members from the ICCA Southeast Asia. So what my colleague have asked today was, what is our recommendation and where are we standing even on the role of indigenous people and communities when it comes to climate action, purposeful, meaningful climate action. So I would like to embody this by declaring or by sharing with you the API declaration that was made by 247 indigenous people and local community represented by 9 countries in the Asian region. And this happened in the Asia Parks Congress from 24th to 29 May. So what I would like to do is there are 3 parts to what I'm going to be sharing today. One is the declaration. The second one is our reality as indigenous people and community. And the third is our recommendation as a community. So I'm going to start off with the declaration. We emphasize the importance of how the potential and impact of collective individual rights on our land, territories, and resource. We also recognize the importance of conservation policy and practices for our lives, livelihood, land, territories, and we seek positive partnership with those conservation actors who are committed to positive and respectful relationship with us. We also want to declare and want to make a statement that all existing and future protected areas would be managed in compliance with our rights, inclusion of our representative in the management of all relevant protected area, and establishing mechanism to enable restitution of our land taken without consent. So I will move on to the next part of our declaration that day. We also note that the Western scientific evidence has increasingly underscored the roles and contribution of indigenous people and many local communities in conserving and sustainably using our lands, territories, and resources. And note that the central importance of our tradition and indigenous knowledge system and the need for those to be recognized on par with conventional or mainstream knowledge. So finally, we reaffirm our values of core responsibility and care for the beings in this world, human and non-human, and recognize the leadership of local communities and indigenous people in resisting threats to our land, territories, including from land grabs, mega development projects, and corporate activities. So I have paraphrased part of our declaration as 247 indigenous members gathered together to make this declaration in May this year. Now I want to move on to our realities. In our community, for our people and in our country, our experiences of conservation policy and practice continue to fall far short of the international commitment that have been made. In too many countries in Asia, our government failed to recognize our status as indigenous people and do not recognize our support, our role as customary owners and custodian of biodiversity and social ecology. Yet areas of remaining high biodiversity value often overlap with the areas that have been managing for generations. In many communities, we continue to suffer the impacts of historical injustice where protected areas created without consent remain in place. And we continue to see protected areas declared or expanded without our free, prior, and informed consent. We are seeing the increasing growth also of carbon-related finance, a language that we had forced to learn and terms that we were forced on us, and we were never part even of the stakeholders' conversation. In both negative and positive way, we have communities beginning to access direct funding through the voluntary carbon market to enhance their livelihood. At the same time, we see attempt to sell carbon credits in which others receive money for the resources held in our territories without our consent and without the sharing of the benefits. So that is our reality, and I feel like I'm not speaking in a way where it is divorced from what you are experiencing, brothers and sisters. So our recommendation this afternoon, we call for a memorandum on the declaration of any protected areas without the involvement of indigenous people and local communities, recognition of our governance and customary management system, and our free, prior, and informed consent. We call for the recognition of our rights to self-determinate, including free, prior, and informed consent, and support for and recognition of our self-generated FPIC protocols. We call for both conservation agencies and government to make a right-based approach standard in all existing and future conservation initiatives. We call for an increased recognition of diverse form of governance, including our traditional governance system, and for increased recognition of the unique role and contribution of indigenous people and many local communities to the conservation of cultural and biological diversity. This particular IPLC declaration is also made available. If any one of you would like to access it, you could have a conversation with us. And maybe I would like to also answer my counterpart question on how ICCA play its role in this particular issue. So what ICCA does is we consolidate our resources and our network across Southeast Asia. What we do when we meet together is that we plan and we strategize on how to get more recognition, to get more visibility in areas and platforms of decision making. So because of this, I think I will end my sharing for this morning, but we have one trailer that we wanted to feature for this morning, and I'm going to pass that to Dazzle, and it is produced by the ICCA for your perusal.
Approximately 25% of the Earth's surface and ocean areas are managed by indigenous peoples and local communities. But it is estimated that these areas hold 80% of the planet's biodiversity. In Southeast Asia, these areas go by the different names Hutan Adat, Lupaing Ninuno, and Kao, but these are generally called territories of life. Given the inextricable link between custodian indigenous communities with nature surrounding them, it is this link and their stewardship on their environment that ensures the sustainability of resources. My name is Giovanni Reyes from the Philippines, and I am going to present to you 5 stories of indigenous peoples documenting, defending, and sustaining territories of life across Southeast Asia.
Thank you very much, Celine, for a very powerful message about the ICCA Southeast Asia Consortium, and also delivering or elevating the messages from the IPLC Declaration, which happened last May 2022 at the World Asia Parks Congress, no, in Malaysia, in Sabah, Malaysia. And thank you also for highlighting the importance of customary tenure recognition, free prior informed consent, or FPIC, and the rights-based approach or human rights-based approach to conservation. So now we move on to Maina to share more about what NTFP-EP Asia is doing in terms of supporting our indigenous people and local communities in Southeast Asia, particularly also ICCA and indigenous women. So Maina, you have 5 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maina from the Non-Timber Forest Products Exchange Program. It is a regional office working with more than 100 grassroots organizations and civil society organizations around Southeast Asia, and our base is in the Philippines. So NTFP believes in linking peoples and forests. We have been in existence since for around 25 years now, and we're working in the areas of tenure rights, conservation, sustainable livelihoods, and indigenous food and health. And we also work on cultural development, youth empowerment, and gender and agency. So for 5 minutes, I hope to share with you the current work NTFP is doing on ICCAs, especially highlighting the role and works of women on the ground. So NTFP at this present climate and biodiversity crisis is really recognizing the role of women, the role that they play in protecting the vital ecosystems around us. So ICCAs, we see this as a countermeasure to the climate crisis that we are having, and it is the best solution that we are promoting for the issues on climate. Unfortunately, the domain that we are still working on, when we talk about conservation, this is a domain that has mostly been led by men, and patriarchal systems still exist. So NTFP supports in the challenging these pre-existing inequalities. So the work that we do with women highlights their long-tested knowledge, wisdom, and capacities to contribute to climate issues and solutions, and protecting and conserving their territories of life. At present, what we are doing at NTFPs, we have the small grant facility that directly supports local actions, especially women-led, community-led actions on the ground. And this includes a host of different gender-just climate actions, which includes forest rehabilitation, monitoring, developing enterprises that are sustainable and NTFP-based. And for us, what we see is the allocation of resources for these grassroots women generate really concrete actions on the ground. And this is what we are calling for our colleagues and supporters to local communities to continue the support to local actions of women. This is our own way of recognizing, upscaling and concretizing support to the magnificent contribution women is giving to sustain their traditions that protects, conserves the ecosystem. We are highlighting this because among environmental funds and environmental organizations, not so much is given to support the actions of women. We may support indigenous community, but it's still different when funds or resources are given directly to the actions of local women in the community. So we hope that this is what also other organizations, we call on the governments and support organizations, conservationists, to put allocation and earmark funds directly to the actions that women do in the community, especially on conservation and sustainable natural resource management. So in the research that we did, only 2% actually among all environmental funds goes to support women's actions on the ground. Environmental actions doesn't necessarily translate to working or supporting women. So that's what we are calling on. So let me show briefly some of the activities that the initiatives of women that we are supporting, from developing livelihoods based on NTFPs, monitoring their territories, and doing actions to conserve and preserve these territories of life. So I'm not going to lengthen my sharing. I just want to reiterate what has been said within this pavilion since the first day of our gathering here at COP. We have been giving or sharing to you very concrete evidences of women doing these activities, not activities, this is part of their life. These are actions that concretely contribute to our issues on climate, and we call on everyone to promote and recognize these activities. We call on everyone to protect the defenders of our territories. So I think that's all. I'll end with.
Thank you so much, Maina, for that very comprehensive discussion on what is the status of community-led funding, funding indigenous women around in Southeast Asia. And we have heard that there's very little funds that goes directly to fund supporting indigenous women initiatives on the ground. So hopefully we have colleagues and parties here that are listening to really heed to the call to action of our speakers here, no? Direct funding for indigenous women, work on the ground, and supporting indigenous people and local communities' activities, as these are not really merely activities, but this is their way of life. So I'm not gonna go lengthy here. I'll proceed to Ladoy to share. Ladoy, hopefully you can share your experience in Myanmar in the role of youth, no? On ICCA work, and also your opportunities, the opportunities that the indigenous youth are seeing in Myanmar, and some challenges and recommendations that you can share with us. So Ladoy, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Daza. Okay, this is Ladoy from Myanmar, and I hope and happy to see you all. So, when I was graduated in the university, I joined one of the indigenous-led NGO called Promotion of Indigenous and Nature Together, and I have conducted a kind of, strategic advocacy work that bring the voice of the local community to the policymaker, the government. We call government policymaker. It took very long time in a policy and law to be able to recognize the rights of indigenous people. Only the time it took almost 5 years to put in the legal framework. It's not easy. So the strategy and activity that we trying to promote the ICCA is we have to find the international recognitions and the text that mention ICCA. For example, the National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan under the CBD, right? All of the member country have to submit to CBD, the MBSAP. So in the case of our country has that action plan from 2015 to 20 to recognize and develop ICCA national level. So it is very important to understand, how the government understand what is ICCA is different. What the community indigenous people understand and interpret. For example, the ICCA are their place. Without the time ICCA came out, indigenous people they have been conserving their environment and forest for thousands of years. And the forest and the area they conserve is their value and their identity and their spiritual belief, life, and their history and culture. We do understand the perspective of governments from conserving. They have good intention, but we have to find a common ground. But we have different approach, different understanding. We have to narrow down the difference to get our common goal, right? Okay, and first of all, we organize a big workshop that there is to educate the government and to inform the local community. There's an international text that encourage to the ICCA in the international level, why we cannot do at the national level and at the ground? For the community, they want their land to be able to recognize in the legal text. If not, they feel that even though they are conserving their homeland, they are guests from the perspective of the outsider. Their life is not guaranteed if their initiative are not recognized in the text, right? So and then we keep doing advocacy work, not only the national level but also international level, organizing workshop, training, dialogue, documenting, and encourage the community and indigenous people to develop community protocol and to convince by showing how they are conserving their environment and their practice and are being researched by us, and we produce kind of policy recommendations, not in short and clear version, and send them to the power holder activity. And we had open opportunity that we experienced in 5 years. There was a real, revisions of the policy and law. For example, the national environment policy, the climate change policy, they did mention that word indigenous people in the text, but we need more. Not only just one word. We need the text that recognize the full and effective participation of indigenous people in the national legal text. And another one is the biodiversity conservation and protected area system. So the government tried, that was not law, it's bylaw. After adoption of the law, no? The government trying to recognize the co-management in the conserved area, and the co-management should be meaningful and should be reflects the community and indigenous value of decision making. We can say which is the value. Another thing is the principle of free, prior, and informed consent. If the local community indigenous people disagree, they should not adopt and they should not develop the national park also, right? They should not develop the conserved area. Of course, we have many challenges, right? So as all of you know that our country has big challenges in political situations. Only a few people can go to the foreign country, but majority of the indigenous people and local community have been staying, and they have to stay in their land. If not, where they can go? Nobody will accept them. So they have to be resilient. They have to conserve their forests. If we have COVID, none of the rights from the outside of the community, they cannot go inside. They only have to depend on the product and the reserve they have near their forest, and they have to rely on them. How can they survive without that forest, right? So the forest, the land and conserved area, and the indigenous people are linked. They never be separate. If they feel that if they migrate to other, they will be losing their identity. And they will say that, oh, who are you? Where are you from? I am from those places. Oh, your area is no longer belong to you. How you can you imagine that you lost your identity, right? Yeah. Yeah. And the most important key point I would like to mention is not only the internally displaced person. There are millions of internally displaced persons in our country because of the conflict and now because of the climate change consequence. So I prepared some of the recommendations. Key one, that there is urgent humanitarian support needs for the indigenous and local community in Myanmar. And the knowledge should be the traditional indigenous knowledge that the elder knows should be passed to the young generation. If not, the young generation is the bitter truth at the local community is the young generation have to move to the city for attending university, have to migrate to the other foreign country to support their family. And it's really coming back to their community. And then if the young generation are not aware of the traditional knowledge and value, how the indigenous people and local community, they can be in sustainable way is It's not possible. That's why the knowledge sharing from the elder is very important. And of course, whoever, including the international agency and the power holder, I mean authority, whatever they want to do, they have to respect the value, the customary land, and then the principle. They have to follow the principle of free, prior, informed consent. That's very key, basic, important point. So the last, not the least, I want to highlight is that indigenous people and local community of Myanmar should not be left behind, wherever that political situation it is. Thank you very much.
You can pass to Van. You can pass. Oh. Thank you so much, Ladoy, for a very strong message of what's happening in Myanmar and your key recommendations as an ICCA youth representative as well, particularly sharing on the importance of intergenerational knowledge transfer, particularly on the traditional knowledge of, from the elders to the youth, and the role of we shouldn't leave Myanmar indigenous people left behind, no? Despite the current political situation that they have. So now we go on to our last speaker, Van, who will be sharing the key messages and recommendations of the Civil Society Organization Forum on Social Forestry in ASEAN and related to climate action and what's happening in COP27. Van, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Daza. Good morning, everybody. My name is Van. I'm original Vietnamese. I'm started as a practitioner with the one Hanoi-based conservation NGO called Pan Natures. But now I'm moved to be like more researchers, work with the University of Bern and University of Lausanne in Switzerland. And my aim is like try to tell more story from the ground about indigenous people and local communities to the world, not only in Southeast Asia, but other global South countries. I am very honored to be here today as representative of 27 local civil society organizations and indigenous people network under the CSO Forum on Social Forestry in ASEAN to deliver the critical message and the recommendation to policymakers and all relevant stakeholders on international climate processes. And it is also the brief of our work together over the last 10 years. We all know that we passed halfway through the COP27, and we agree that it is time to take actions, but together. However, each group has its own pace, powers, and agency. Some are strong, some are less or more vulnerable and need more support. But their own matters in the process of the climate decision making. Within these big pictures of the climate actions, based on our experience from the ground, we strongly call the recognition of the role of indigenous people and local communities and civil society organizations as equals as other actors. They should be considered as the change maker from below in translating our international target and national commitment into actions. Their knowledge over generations in their own territory of life, equipped there with experience and expertise to bricolage, practical and policy solutions that truly work. To ensure the meaningful engagement of the indigenous people and local communities, we first have to be sure that they have right to access and fully understand the international commitment of their own countries through the developed FPIC policy at all levels and follow the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People, UNRIF. We then also call for providing sufficient resources, including the direct financial support to set up the independent grievance mechanisms. These mechanisms should be considered as an important data hubs for the laws and policies monitoring and evaluation system at country level. During the first week of the COP27, we also see the key messages that call for unities and solidarities by bringing together different voice and radical collaborations across scale, sectors, and border. This call bring many opportunities, but also raise many governance risks. So as practitioner, We also call for the transformative change through the inclusive governance based on evidence from the ground and co-design of the multiple pathways towards climate actions, in which we must agree with each other that the local value-based initiative and solutions, though tiny, but sustainable impacts across scale, place, issue, and sector. We also should agree that there is no single knowledge. There are diversity of them out there, especially from the indigenous people and local communities, need us to recognize and respect and maintain over time and generations. Within these processes, trust building, transparencies, accountabilities, and as our colleague just mentioned before, the recognizing of the roles and strengthen the capacity contributions of the indigenous people and local communities are also essential. Further, in the inclusive governance, we also need to ensure that indigenous people and local communities can be able to cope with the complexity of change through the adaptive, enabling learning, experimentation, and reflexivity processes. We take action to climate, but at the same time, I think we also need to reflect on how to other pillars, biodiversities and human well-being will contribute to or be impacted by what we call just transitions in climate actions. And more for the countries in the global south, like my home country in Southeast Asia, we need to focus on the question like how we do the climate action while still conserve the crucial biodiversity hotspot, and the local community and indigenous people can get benefits directly and no one left behind. We recommend here to recognize and secure the rights of indigenous people and local communities over their territories, customary land, forest tenure based on their customary practice. To make it come true, we call for the simplified and fast track the customary tenure recognitions processes, and also provide the resources to support local community and indigenous people for their capacity building, documentation, mapping, and constructions of the effective network and collaboration to addressing the gap. However, the recognition of the tenure rights doesn't automatically result in the intended impact to enable the condition under which indigenous people and local communities can use their right to achieve more positive outcome across multiple dimensions and scale. We also need to set up a national or regional funding mechanisms, active trust fund, also discover more domestic funding mechanisms that they can directly access. We also need to improve and strengthen the collaboration and dialogue, not only within science and policy, but also with society. We also need the support to creation of the communities, economies, and livelihoods through the sustainable like non-timber forest product collections or forest-based commodification, and create the legal framework or incentive for establishing the community forest enterprise led by and benefit for indigenous people and local community. And now for the conclusions, I would like to highlight in the great transitions at the spirit of the COP27, we all need each other, and therefore we need to work together. And we also need that our representative here is not like only a law to be here, but we are valued, our contribution and our voice are listened and integrated into the climate decision-making process. So I should end up my talk here. Thanks for attention.
Thank you very much, Van, for sharing in summary our key recommendations from the civil society organization on social forestry in ASEAN. You can scan the QR code in front of you to get to know more about the key messages and recommendations, and we hope this resonates to the call since day one of the COP of our brothers and sisters, indigenous people and local communities here in the IP Pavilion. If you also want to watch the full video of the Celebrating the Territories of Life, you can also scan the link, the QR code in front of you. It's also available in our YouTube page. Unfortunately, we don't have much time left. for question and answer, but our speakers will still be here at the IP Pavilion. If you have any questions or clarifications, you can talk to them directly. I think we are still here a few days before. Again, we are NTFP-EP and ICCA Consortium, and we are in solidarity of our brothers and sisters here at Indigenous people and local communities here at the IP Pavilion. So thank you so much for the opportunity and the space you have provided for us. Have a good afternoon.